welcome everybody to Learning with Belvista Studios. I've got Ghislaine here. I want to recognize you because I really love your curiosity. I love that you're all about solving the right problem. I think you go into a lot of detail from what I can see on your posts on LinkedIn about the process and the co-creation stuff. And I think that's awesome because it really resonates with how we approach projects as well. So I want to kick off with helping people understand, because you're not a learning designer. So talk us through some kind of projects, problems, or products that are some examples of what you're working on and what you do in your world.
Nice. Okay. So I guess I would have to start talking about process design. So basically these days, the way I would label myself is a process designer and facilitator. But for the past 10 years, I worked mostly in product design in the software industry. So
like apps and websites, or what do you mean by products?
Yeah, well, product is mostly, yes, apps.
Yeah.
But it can also apply to, because you could have, applications that run as websites.
Yeah.
And so like making that transition from product design to process design, it was mostly, I think it started when I received, my training as a design thinking practitioner. So with design thinking, you will usually have, all the phases for the design process, going from observing the problem to defining it to, uncovering this sort of point of view.
Yeah.
And then you basically go through building a prototype and testing it. And you will usually, you either repeat everything if you didn't get it right at first, or you might.
And that's okay.
And that's the whole thing, because like once you understand, the way design thinking is supposed to work, it's more than just, the steps that you're following. That it's also very liberating to know that at the end of it, you might not have solved the problem, but now a missing piece of information that if you hadn't gone through those steps, you wouldn't have figured out. And that's the whole definition of what they call a wicked problem, which is.
So can you explain that?
Yeah. So wicked problem is a problem that exists, but the only way to get more information about it or to actually understand it is to start building something. So you gain more knowledge as you start to experiment, because in a way, those prototypes, you're looking for the edge of the problem, like how big it is. It's like you have this sort of flashlight that can only, show you one part of it. And the more points you're eliminating, you're just, making assumptions about what else is there that we're not seeing. So you need to sort of find a limit. And that's why design thinking says, you have to delay judgment, because judgment will not get you all the way there to sort of crash and know, like, this is where this ends. So now let's check out what's on the other side. And that's how you start to. So there are ways you can actually, you cannot have the entire time to actually, look at all the edges. So you need to have some sort of focus.
Yeah.
And that's where this point of view part comes into play, because at some point you're going to have a divergent phase where you want to go wild and aim for quantity. That you want to have 100 ideas, but then you have to develop a point of view. And that's your starting point. So another thing you learn is like constraints are actually good, because and I like to, sometimes when I sometimes run workshops where I'm trying to get people into that design thinking mindset. And so sometimes I will just, ask them to, can you draw like a base? And that is something we all have that in our heads. Yeah. And most of the times, you know, their first drawing is the typical, you know, the base that has like this curved form where
That's
it's,
what was in my
you know,
mind. Yes.
and they will all draw it. And then I have one that is hidden behind like I put this sort of white box, and then I move it, and it's that base. And everyone's like, wow,
Like a
that's
magician, like you predicted.
yeah, like I predicted. And because that's what our brain does, right? It just looks for the reference that we're all used to. And then I asked them, you know, can you now draw 8 different bases? And then it's so hard. Like it takes them a lot of time to try. And it's just variations of that same, you know, it's like this one is shorter, this one is wider, but they all look the same.
Yeah.
And then you're okay, so now, you know, let's try to draw a base for a children's room. And now you get a lot of crazy stuff like a unicorn base, like star-shaped, rocket shaped base, and then you have the tiny windows, and that's where you might put flowers. So and that's where people can't really stop coming up with ideas, is in, you know, if it's going to be in a child's room, it will break. So let's make them out of foam or some other material. Maybe they are, you know, maybe they cannot fall for some reason. Like you have to make the bases, and that's, you know, and that's where I feel, you know, if you're connecting with, you know, whoever's going to use that, people tend to have more ideas because now they're developing a point of view and they're looking at this object in the context of, you know, this room and the user and all the things that could go wrong. And you might even end up with, you know, do they really need decoration? And, you know, should it be a toy? And so design thinking also offers that perspective of the solution that is to not build it.
Yes.
You know, to not build the thing that, and that I feel it's letting go of that notion where you will have to come up with a solution no matter what, because then you're biased from the get-go. So okay, so the short story is that I got into that a while ago, and then I started to implement that, you know, with at my current job.
Yeah.
And trying to get, because design thinking, you cannot do it by yourself. I mean, you could have your own ideation thing, but it's, you know, you have to involve other people, because that's where the sort of the diversity part comes into, and that generates more ideas. But what I felt is, even though I was able to bring everyone into a call and go through it, I wasn't able to unlock their creativity. Like,
how come?
I wasn't, well, there was a lot of resistance, and I felt, you know, like I should be better. Like, I know the process and I understand it.
Yeah.
But people will resist because, you know, why are we wasting, you know, our time doing this? It doesn't seem like such a big problem. And you cannot really force them to think otherwise, because that's their perception and that is valid. So it was like a huge block for me, because I wasn't able to get them to realize that the more we do this, the more we invest time in this area where everything is a bit more abstract, we will then have better conversations. And I think one of the big mistakes I made coming out of that training was that I went back to work and I started to observe everything that was wrong. Because you now get this perspective, right? And I felt like, oh, we're doing meetings completely wrong. You know, the documents that we're writing are not, we should be co-creating everything. Like, and if you don't know how to communicate that, you will most likely offend someone, because everyone is doing the best they can. And if you have new knowledge and you don't know how to transfer that or teach people why, you will come across as someone who feels, you know, I know the right way of doing things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I learned, and I learned that I guess the wrong way. I wish they had prepared us for, you know, this is how it will feel going back to work after this, you know, intense learning that you just went through. And you will start to see things that could be better, but you need to also design that process. And that's where this whole thing about process came to mind. It's like, I have now this thing that I want other people to join, and I'm not able to get there. So then I learned about, and this was a couple of years later, because all that time I was just writing or trying to, you know, understand, like taking notes, but I also tried to get them into design thinking without mentioning it.
Yeah.
As in, I will send you a couple of ideas and I want to talk to you about it. Like, just feel free to. And then I would, but that is, you know, it's just, it's not going to be the whole deal. It's
so,
just,
yeah, keep going.
No, I mean, go ahead.
I was just going to say, how did you overcome that? So you've done some training on design thinking, you're excited to implement it, you start to observe around the workplace things that are not quite working from your training, you're eager to apply it, you can see how it's going to help your business and the clients that you guys serve, and then people are resistant. And how did you overcome that? How you talked about communicating, getting people communicating what you had learned to the people. Yeah. How did you do that?
Exactly. So, like I said, I faced that barrier, and I tried so many things, and over time I got frustrated. So then I went on to work at a different place, and then I decided, you know, so I looked for a place that, you know, I thought they would benefit from having that sort of process oriented thinking, because back then, the previous place, we were building sort of one product, and we had a user base. If you're building one product, and let's say you're doing that for the past 10 years, so you have what you consider is a good understanding of who your users are.
Yeah.
So you're going to be less inclined to try to figure that out many times. You know, just, you know, I am going to challenge this knowledge, because you already built your business around that user base, and you consider that, you know, whatever was true 5 years ago, it probably remains, unless your numbers change in a drastic way. They're not. So the way they would apply design thinking then is, you know, what are unexpected uses for a product? What are new markets that we might enter? And that comes with a whole different, you know, it's way more complicated, because it will require more resources.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe going to a place that has this sort of agency where you will take on different projects, and they will all be different in terms of who the users are, and you will have the client onboarding happening at least a couple of times during the year, and you will focus on developing that client relationship. So I thought, I had never worked in that. I always worked in like single product, sort of same user base. So that was my thinking, is like, if I shift there, that will be happening multiple times, so I will have more opportunity to simulate, because the more you start new, and the shorter the cycle is better for learning, rather than having to negotiate with all the history that everyone had at that company. It was a bigger challenge. I know it can be done by someone who is more experienced, but that wasn't me back then, right? So I went on to work with this sort of agency model, and started to look into their process. How do they start? What do the clients that engage for a really long time, what are they like? What was their introduction like? And I would just ask questions, and I felt I was going somewhere. and that's when I heard about process design and facilitation, and it seemed like, oh, this is the missing puzzle. So I went to there's a school in Sweden called Hyper Island.
Oh yeah.
I don't know, you probably heard of them. And they were, I think, one of the first to really set the basis for what learning by doing should be like. And I know that there's probably others that did that before, but I think Hyper Island got well known for their approach. And what's weird, like I've heard a lot about them, and I was so anxious to go there, and I thought, oh, I'll get all of this knowledge about how to design processes and how to facilitate. And they barely give you any instructional material. And I know a lot of people there were shocked, as in, my company paid for this and I have to go back with something.
Yeah.
But they just show you 3 sort of slides, and you get to work.
Yeah.
And you get to work, and it's super intense, because there's like this group of reflection, and you're sharing all the time, and you're hearing back from them all the time. And then they split into smaller groups, and again you're talking, and you're hearing, and you're providing feedback. And you will do that for 8 hours straight, like just assemble. Wow. Assemble, talk, and then get feedback, and then move on to try a different thing, finish that thing, go back to reflection.
Yeah.
And yeah, when I got there, they had this whole table filled with candy and a lot of sugary snacks. And I thought, like, this is weird. But I think you're using so much of your sort of brain energy.
Yeah.
At some point, 4 hours later, you're just eating candy all the time.
Well, I think I would have lasted 4 minutes, and then I would have had the candy snacks.
Yeah, exactly. And you are just, when you go back after the first day, you think, like, nothing happened. Like, what is this? What did we do all day? And it would just keep happening. And at some point, you had people who were extremely emotional. And I would look at the facilitators who were like, we were all in this circle, and they would be around us, just looking at us. It's like, they're going to do something here. There's conflict. Like, this person is not agreeing with that other person. Now they're going to facilitate this and sort of bring, an end to the conflict. And they wouldn't. And I felt like, do they just stand there? And, what is going on? And at that point, you don't know that was intended. That was part of what they had designed. And of course, no one is going to get hurt, because you're also, as you're getting to this point, they have also planned for us to develop enough openness and trust.
Yeah.
To be able to have that conflict without really, hurting ourselves. So it just happens gradually. And it's something that I think a lot of people refer to as the messy middle, where you completely lose the vision. Like, you don't know what are we doing here. And I know a lot of people felt lost. And so that went on, and we started to work on our projects, and we had to create this facilitated event where they would actually, you know, we would actually have people going through the process that we had created, which is extremely powerful. Like just, you know, finishing a long training and actually going from, you know, through every single point until you deliver that thing. And in the end, like there were people who resisted. I know that at some point one of them said, you know, this makes no sense. I cannot go back without. You have to give us something. Like, please give us like, you know, material for us to take back home and show this to people. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this.
Yeah.
With this experience. But the last day after we sort of went through everything, and they sort of unveiled the whole process that they had designed for this training. And it was just mind-blowing because you understood everything that happened. And it's like, wow, we can actually do this. And you had this sort of power of, you went through the conflict, you survived it, and now you no longer feel like you actually want to, you know, take something with you because it's now somehow it's in your brain.
Yeah.
Right. And you even know what you have to do to make it, to improve that skill. So that's when I sort of fell in love with process design.
Yeah.
Because it's not, you know, what you're going to do. It's more about, you know, why you're going to do it, and how those steps will look like. So before, you know, you would see things like, I don't know, you say, you know, I'm crossing the street. And then process design is like, are you running? Are you dodging cars? You know, is the, you know, you do need help? Are you lost? Are you just, you know, crossing the street to get somewhere? And you start to see that there's this whole thing that you hadn't considered before. When someone is doing something, there are so many different ways that that can be done. So before you would think about, you know, let's just wireframe, which is, there's a typical exercise for, you know, one thing that got very popular in tech back then was this sort of sprint, 5-day sprints.
Yeah.
I don't know if you probably heard of that. As in,
yeah, because I look at AJ and Smart's YouTube, and they do it a lot.
I think they actually, well, no, they did not come up with it, but they changed their whole business to just offer that part.
Yeah, they were product design. That's right. And then they learned about sprints from some guy who wrote a book called Sprint, he did it at Google. And then they decided, our whole business now is just, we help with the 5-day sprint to get that product off the road. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I can see why they decided, because it determines everything. Like, that person who went through that can actually go with that, with those insights, and they will most likely build a good product. And if you have a lot of companies, you know, offering to build that product, then, you know, they just decided to go without that. And I thought, when I read that story, I thought it made a lot of sense.
And I think for people, it is really interesting. And for people watching from the learning design industry, you know, what that 5-day sprint is about is really, it's just the analysis phase. Like, they are only really looking at the analysis of what's the problem we're trying to solve, the motivation piece. They do get to a prototype start phase, and then from there you would be able to maybe go into a storyboard or start developing something. But that they're showing, like, their whole business is built on just the analysis, discovering what's the true problem, what's the current experience, what's the future experience. It just shows how valuable that process is when companies are willing to pay for only 5 days of that part before they then go venture out into whether it's like, the solution part of it, basically.
Exactly. And so part of that sprint process is that I I think it's on day 2 that they do this exercise called Crazy Eights.
Tell us.
Where, yeah, they're discussing this feature, let's say. And so they bring everyone from the company or, whoever they chose to. It doesn't have to be designers, of course. It can be developers or executives. Yep. And the thing is that they will come up with 8 different wireframes.
Okay.
And then they put them on a wall but the thing is, when you, and that is, what are we going to do? That is, we're going to draw 8 different versions of this. But when you think about it from the point of process design, and you just go and implement, and you think, okay, this will give me the result that I want. It will, I will have, 8 different wireframes. But when you think from a process design perspective, what is it? Why are we doing this, and what is it that we're trying to convey to the people joining this? And if you haven't done the work where you're going to create that environment, that learning space, they will have a lot of people get really stressed. And you might actually, what if one of them, they cannot come up with 8 different versions? And I think that would be the case for a lot of people. So they will either completely dislike the exercise, which would hurt your future, chances of getting them in that room again, or supporting your initiative. Or they might even end up feeling that they're not creative enough, right? So there is, and I just feel that when that became popular, like everyone's like, oh, let's just, sprint everything. And you might be, just getting people without the preparation, without them feeling, exploring what their sort of creative wounds are. Because a lot of people carry those, and those are, I think, at least in when they are facing this, they might not have thought about that for years. But almost everyone has one experience at the classroom where you said something or it was dismissed.
Yeah.
And you just carry that, like, I'm not a creative person. So I think that, when you're planning a process, you will actually have, not just an activity layer, but you will have this set of behaviors, but you will also have, theories and models that should be introduced at different phases.
Yeah.
You need to discuss, you need to be open with people, and you need to ease them into, you need to know who your audience is.
Yeah.
You can even assess their, their perceptions regarding creativity before you even bring them into that room. You can have that as part of your process. Or, what will the right conditions be? How do I want to sort of bring people into this room, and and that's the same that I think that's the work that the facilitators at Hyper Island did. And that's why they felt so confident about letting conflict happen. But I think, as part of your, of the process you're going to design, that has to be a consideration. The risk that, of people being there, and you haven't maybe, because you're just looking at your point of view where, well, I wouldn't mind not being able to do X because I know that I have done that before. So for me, it's just, this is one instance, and I can assume that, I don't know, if I have a whiteboard session and there's one day where I cannot come up with this user flow, I probably have 100 other references where I was able to do it. So it's probably not going to destroy me. Like, I'm not going to walk out of that room thinking like I'm the worst designer. I will probably be able to, assume that, okay, I had this other thing in my head, or I don't really believe in this approach. So that influenced my creative process, and that's why I wasn't able to come up with this.
Yeah.
But for most people, that might be, their first time doing something like this.
Yeah.
And so you need to be very, very careful about how that might affect their sort of self-efficacy perception. So that's why whenever I start to plan this, I like to think about, what are the values that we need to keep in mind. And I know there's so many, like there's discussion about values, and I feel people sometimes just throw them up there, like, oh, we live in this, and in openness, and in solidarity and compassion.
Mm-hmm.
But when you think about the actual word and what is it, why is a value called a value? And it's something that you actually value, right? So a value there should be a way where you can say, this is what this is worth for us as an organization, and this is how, we demonstrate that this has a value. Because if you really didn't value something,
yeah,
would you be putting an effort into protecting that? Right? Let's say, I don't know, I value my phone, right? So whenever I stand from a table, or I'm having coffee, I will look for it, and I will make sure, oh, it's in my pocket, like, and you're doing things. I'm not throwing it. I will feel bad if it falls. It's because I can assign a value to it.
Yeah.
Whether it is right. So it should be the same thing we should think about those values of what am I doing so that this value that it doesn't break or get lost or is, removed from this process. So you shouldn't just add words. You should, of course, it's easier to do that with material things.
Mm-hmm.
But what effect does, us breaking this value has in terms of our organization or with the people that work here?
Yeah.
So you need to be mindful of that. And so I think that's where I wish, process design would be more popular, maybe, and not just in almost everything we do, because it's you're taking people through a learning experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there is no way that one becomes more creative without a process of self-awareness. And if you're going to be whoever is facilitating that, you want to be very careful, and you want to build trust over time.
Yep.
So that's another thing with process design, is that you're not just planning, well, you might plan just one intervention, but as a process designer, you should know that there will be, they're all connected. So there will be this other opportunities. You might not just push everything. So in that sense, I would take this sort of 5-day sprint. Maybe you can break the rules. I think you can decide that you're not ready for just applying that formula, and it might be that your organization needs a different process, and that there is some history also. I think if you ask many people what their experiences have been with this sort of innovation, when a coach comes to an organization that for a long time hasn't been innovating.
Yeah.
So you hire someone and they will do all of this sort of coaching and intervention. It could even, like, some people would feel that it threatens their position, or right. So you're also dealing with and if they had a bad experience before, it might reflect on how they will behave during those workshops.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where I get to learning design, because I feel it's sometimes you cannot really tell them apart, right? It's just there is this vulnerability in learning, and there's a lot that you will tell yourself, about your capacity or what you can do based on a class that you took where you felt at first that I'm not able to do this, or how the instructor decided to bring people to the front to demonstrate something, and how they decided that the process of asking questions or raising hands was going to be like. Even those small details, they can have a big impact. And I am now seeing that and I think you mentioned this, that this user experience design and instructional design, they're sort of like blending in together. And I think it goes both ways, because I think user experience designers will also have to educate their clients. And one thing I wish I would see less of over time is, at least a while ago, there's a lot of talk in the design world of how clients are terrible. I know there's even memes, and there is one where you have, I think, the designers there, and there's the client just reaching on top of their mouse and doing things for them, and you hear those stories, and they will complain like, I don't have any creative freedom. The client just wants to make the logo bigger. and you just paint this picture of them as this group that is just clients, right? It has no, there are no shades there, so just making them all into a whole. But they they probably have there is, I mean, one, you shouldn't ever group people into one. Like, as soon as you start doing that, there's probably something that we're not getting. And the client with a large budget will probably feel different from someone who has a small budget. Mm-hmm. And one that has a small budget will not all the time be looking to sort of lower your price or get a bargain, or be a person who who is not valuing your work. It just means that maybe you cannot, for the price that they have, you cannot provide the level of service that you would I can only provide the level.
It's just the
it's
scope
my cat.
of
I'm
it,
sorry.
basically. But that's okay. She's getting very excited about what you're saying. I think that is just the challenge, or a skill that you can develop, which is scope management and stakeholder management. So where things do start to push, or clients push back, or want more for less, that's you just being very clear from the beginning, this is the scope and this is what you're getting. And when it deviates from the scope, you are having those conversations.
Exactly. So yeah, that's the approach I like to take, is like, for me to actually solve your problem, it's, like, your budget won't, I cannot assure that I will, be able to deliver that. And I think that is a better conversation to have. And you might actually be educating someone along the way. And I had some of those conversations, and then they would say, so what would I need to learn to get this part done?
Yeah.
And then maybe by then I can pay you for this other part that I don't think I can handle. And once they show you I had this happen, like they show you the work they've been doing.
Yeah.
Like I followed your advice, and I went on and I interviewed some of and I have all of this transcripts, and I got this part that I think, and now I want you to just, help me sort of find the connections here, or help me make sense of this. But I did part of my work. And maybe they would have never taken that approach. Yeah. Maybe they would have felt, oh, the designers are so cocky, are so, but at some point your response drove them to actually put themselves in your shoes and say, wow, interviewing is hard. Mm-hmm. Like I now I went through it, and I also know why you're charging this, because it was so difficult. I didn't know what to ask. I had to look at other people interviewing. I had to read this. Mm-hmm. And now this is what I did, and I value this so much. And now I know that with your expertise, you can actually find this, and now my budget will make more sense. But I'm also coming from a new place where I went through your, and that is another learning opportunity. Yeah. You are dismissing something or a project or whatever, but at the same time, just changing your response took someone else through a learning journey. Yeah. Where you could, so that's, it's not, maybe someone will say, yeah, that's not my role. Like I cannot, but it's, if you feel that it might, if they're coming from a right place, I don't see why, we couldn't have more of those conversations. And yeah. And I think, of course, like building your own thing is hard, and they're probably going through, a lot of anxiety as well. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things as part of this, the workshops that I was mentioning, is one exercise that I like to do is, because at first I take people through, I will sort of develop self-awareness and build something out of, connect with their thinking and build something from that. And then usually what they will say at the end is like, okay, that was fun, and I see what you did there, but my client would never agree to go through this or to connect with at that level with me emotionally. And so the next workshop, I share this story about a purchase I made that I never told anyone about it because I was so embarrassed by it. And I think everyone has that one thing they were super excited about. And once you got it, it was so disappointing. And now you bought it, so it's on you, right? you could hide it, especially if other people knew about it. It's like, did you actually get that that one thing? And for some reason, let's say you cannot even return it, right? So now you're stuck with it. And because even returning it would be to face that you made a mistake. So I found it surprising that every time I try that workshop, people actually find that one thing, and then they feel they have all these strong emotions about it. As in, I when I moved to this place, I saw that everyone, wore this type of coat, and I wanted to blend in. Yeah. So I got one, and I felt it was like, it felt ridiculous. So then it's in my closet. It's always there, and I it was expensive, and I don't ever wear it. And whenever I look at it, it just reminds me of this. And So once they go through that and we talk about, you know, how do we convey meaning to those purchases, and how we put that, you know, the things that that have meaning for us, they translate it into an object, something that we got because we thought it would fulfill some sort of meaning that we hold for our lives, whether it's beauty or justice or, you know, blending, belonging. And so now, you know, they end up looking at from that perspective, and it's okay. So it's the same thing when you're selling this, you know, whatever it is that you end up doing or delivering, whether it's a logo or it's a website, you know, that person has to put it out there. Like their friends will see it, their colleagues will see it, their employees would see it, and that can be very, very stressful. So even if they might have an experimental side to them, as in, yeah, I want to go crazy with this logo, they are also scared of how they will be judged. You know, should I just stick to a conventional approach? It has to look corporate. But in the end, you know, you also see other companies having this crazy brands, but you're not ready to take that leap. You might feel, you know, how will other people perceive me? Is this? And so by doing that, and by them reflecting on how their sense of meaning was sort of broken when they thought they were getting something, and in the end it turned out, and just remembering that, then they can understand that sometimes, you know, clients won't be, even though you might see things where you think, oh, I think this is lame, or you know, why do they want corporate things? Why do they hold this ideas about how this should look like? If you're going to transition to a perspective where, you know, I want to make this person choose this very crazy logo because I think this is what's cool right now, and sometimes we might be even influenced by what will go on our portfolio, right? We don't want to have. So I think, yes, you have to develop that empathy, and maybe yes, they will eventually get there, but you have to also design that process. What is it that you could do to get them to experience their company in that, you know, in where, what would happen if we bring in this vibrant branding? How would employees feel about it? And there are probably things that you can expose people to that aren't necessarily the logo itself, because now you're not thinking about the what. You're not thinking about, this is the brand that I will deliver. And the only way for me to get people used to that is to show them a picture and get their perception. Now you might even plan for a different process. And maybe, you know, maybe you bring them to a place, you know, maybe there's a studio where people like that are working, and maybe you talk to them and you say, you know, I want to have like book one of your rooms. I want to have a meeting there, and it might be the first time they walk into a place where people are dressed differently, they're doing things, you know, there's post-its everywhere, and they might experience that and say, wow, I wish our office looked like this. Like, wow, they have this giant bird sculpture in the middle of but they all seem very professional. Maybe, my ideas were coming from a different place. And so I didn't show them a logo, but I found this process that could get them, to experience what something like that might feel like. And then maybe when you go back, they will look at the corporate logo and say, let's just maybe, this is like, I'm more, because you will be scared of the things that you cannot see. And you have to understand that even though you hang out at, hipster coffee shops, they maybe, they don't. So, you either try that without necessarily going into the logo itself.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it that you can do? Where is it that you can take them or invite them or make them part of, so that they can start, coming to terms with something that might be inside them, or it might have the opposite effect. And then that, they would never feel okay with this logo. They would never feel okay with wearing this on a t-shirt, or maybe even you join their world, right? So that I think that influences a lot of what I try to do with my clients, and it has to come from a place of openness and developing trust over time.
That's cool. I've heard, I can't remember now what book it was, but I was just finished a book recently, and it spoke about some other strategies for creating openness to help people take on ideas. Small things such as having open windows. If you have bottles of water, have the lids off the water already, that openness, the welcomeness to just be able to grab that and not have to ask permission, because the closed lid is actually like a barrier to having magazines open. All these things that are open, the symbolism of openness allows a person's mind to get into a frame of, I'm also open, and then they will absorb your ideas better. So just some little tactics.
No, and I love those sort of tips, because like I said, it can be just the way you phrase the question, and it changes everything, because you're just finding these opportunities for creating this shared learning, and I think that will eventually change a lot of that narrative around clients just wanting to control what you do, or someone feeling disappointed because the design they had created ended up looking completely different. And at some point you felt I had no control over that process. And I think it was something I wrote about, right? Because you have your own ideas and the client will have theirs. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, they will most likely just bring that back if you're just thinking that you own the entire creative process. Yeah. There is a need for people to feel that they're contributing something, especially if it means something to them. Yeah. And so there's this whole theory about, I think it was David Brock's. I don't know, maybe I'm getting that name wrong, but it's called SCARF. Yeah. And it's the model David to Rock. Understand. Yeah. Oh, it's David Rock. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that applies. It's one of my favorites, because when you think about it, you're talking about like status, autonomy, relatedness, certainty, and fairness. And autonomy is a big part of letting someone else, craft the vision for your project. So in their look for autonomy, if you're not letting them, participate or have that, they will compensate for it. So what they say is like you either attack or retreat. So you will see things like that, make the logo bigger, because I want to feel that sense of autonomy. And this is a decision I feel I have to make. So they're just, coming from that place where, you don't want to give up complete control.
Yep.
So the creative process, it has to be, you have to start from this place where you're setting up the basis for this co-creation.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that is what I aim to bring into the work I'm doing. And that's where I get really interested about, because these are all learning, it's learning theory, right? I think it's David Alsobel, and he talks about this subsumption theory of how we assimilate ideas.
Okay.
Into, so that we learn on top of existing knowledge, and that's how we adopt those new ideas. So if you don't know what that sort of mental schema looks like for your client, you're both seeing different things. So people, for example, if let's say they learn what a diamond shape is looks like, right? But they might not think about it as a diamond. Like they go from, okay, how do I create a diamond shape? And it's like a square, but I rotate it. So now it's like a rotated square. So they might see it like that, but you might look at the diamond in a different way. So you're both looking at the same shape, but what you're doing is you're assimilating into, if you have never seen that, let's say a child has never seen that, it's like, oh, it's a square and it's like this. And if you look at them drawing it, for the first time, like it might look like a bit, the lines don't match. There is not, because they're not thinking in that way. It's like, oh, I'm rotating this. So you need to anchor new learning into what was already in your head. And that's, I think that's the whole part of, us learning from, different fields. And then you just see them pop up in different ways. And there's one thing that kids do a lot that I think I love this, where when you were little, you learned how to draw something really cool because they taught you this trick of, just do this, or it can be with letters, and then you complete it, and it's like this funny looking dog, or like we all had, and that never goes. Like with time, it's just people continue to do it because they learn how, because it started with something you already knew how to do. And on top of that, you do it. And then it's, oh, I feel very proficient at drawing this type of dog because they taught me that I had to do like this 2 circles. And then, and that never goes away. It's like, it just stays. And most kids have learned that at some point.
Yeah.
So I think it's just that, right? If you know how to anchor a new thing to what they already have in their heads, like start from something I know how to do, then you will most likely, be able to create this stronger shared ideas. Yeah. But that also takes, it takes more work. But I feel that it optimizes everything that goes, after that, as in not having to make endless revisions or every, meeting that wasn't necessary. So, yeah, I think there is so much that we can learn from people, working and learning, and especially right now when we're also going remote. And that's a whole new world. And I feel that's where learning designers will have, you know, a big opportunity to bring that, you know, what they know, what they have experienced, and you know, let's just all help each other learn.
Yeah. I'm curious to know, what I find interesting is we do a lot of co-creation. So it surprises me how many people work solo and don't ask their client or their stakeholder to contribute to build the solution. So an example activity that we find is really, really good is empathy maps. And when we do an empathy map, it's basically 4 quadrants, and we do it from a future desired state. So what do we want the people to do, to feel, to think, to see, or to say as a result of the learning that they go through? And this is something we run virtually or in person, and we just get users, the client, like a subject matter expert, project sponsor, any of the key stakeholders in the room, and they help us co-create that together. So that's one activity, and that helps us so much, because for our projects, we never have to go to Google to find that how do you do something. We don't really go to their processes or procedures either, or existing content. We say, what are the future desired behaviors that you want us to train? It's done through an empathy map, and that's what we build the solution on. I was wondering, what exercises or activities do you do that you are co-creating that are really effective to help you move forward in your projects that you're working on?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what you're saying is that sometimes they will not join the conversation as much as you would.
Well, for me and our team, we do co-creation. So we do it with our clients. It benefits us a lot. I don't like working on projects where clients are not available. But as I talk to more people, they say we don't co-create with our stakeholders. We do all the work ourselves. So I'd love to encourage people to do more co-creation. So what activities do you do that are really impactful when you do them as a co-creation as opposed to a solo activity?
Oh yeah, okay. So one thing I do like to do is I like to set up. So I know some people will be scared if they start with a completely blank canvas.
Yeah, I would be.
So yeah, and especially when it comes to the subject matter experts. So most of the clients that I'm working with, they are creating AI based solutions like digital transformation in the healthcare sector. So sometimes I will have a subject matter expert who has their entire career has been on doing that same thing, but just with humans. Right? So if I were to extract knowledge from them and say, oh, we're doing this, we're going to build this, and I want to know how did this person perform this job. So what you will get is that there's like that the computer doesn't have the logic to do that. And what they're telling you is like, this person did so much more than just, what a computer would do. And they will want to show, they show me like, this is the book that I had to learn in order to gather those, diagnosis codes. And now you're doing that with one click. And there's this computer reading, but there are nuances. There are things that I knew how to create. So in that case, for example, I like to get an understanding of their process.
Yeah.
So for this specific workshop where I wanted to find, I want you to tell me, how this decision-making process works. And we want to translate that into the, whatever the algorithm will do. So at first I probably watched, there's a lot of videos of people doing what she would tell me about, and I loved getting actual quotes from them. Like I would transcribe the videos.
Yeah.
And then at some point they would say, so now what I'm doing is I'm looking at this thing and I'm finding the place where I can start throwing lines and doing this. And if you understand their language, if you have the quotes, I like to add quotes of the actual people saying, doing things,
Yeah.
and start talking. You bring a lot of that human side. So I will sometimes, I think YouTube is a great resource for getting those sort of quotes. And you would be surprised about even niche, activities. Like if you're looking at how someone who works with wood talks about, they will have a particular language.
Yeah.
Because the spoken voice is, the way you speak is completely different of how people write. So I like to put that, sort of paint those portraits with quotes and show that I have done my homework.
Yeah.
And that I'm coming from a place where I am valuing that. And for example, in this case, I prepared this, this person, this is what they do, this is how they approach the problem, this is the quotes that they use. And I let them tell me about that.
Yeah.
And it's such a big difference, because once they see that, it's, oh, this person is talking about, how complicated it is to find, let's say this code has to go with this condition. You should never diagnose this without this. Or maybe there's a typical mistake that people make, like doctors, when they write the stage of a disease, they use Roman numerals. And so the computer would read it as, this is a completely different thing. I would get it wrong. And it's okay. So if you do a bit of homework, you would know something about their industry that they feel they only know, and that creates this sort of bonding.
Yeah.
And so I let them tell stories, and I think that's where storytelling is very useful. And I feel that leads to better co-creation. And I will also make it, as much as I can, completely transparent. I am extracting this information for this reason.
Yeah.
And I will sometimes have, the machine or the algorithm represented by some icon or something, as in, when this happen, this will do this. This is the way that the process will be replicated.
Yeah.
And I feel that, complete transparency, especially when you're dealing with this sort of sensitive subject of automation, and also doing storytelling, which I think is a very human thing to do. It's like, tell me about, those people that you knew, working in this industry. Like, what was the thing that annoyed you the most, and what is it, what are the secrets that, because, one does get a whole sense of identity from something you've done your entire life. So that is I would say that's a part of my process, is just looking at YouTube for, it doesn't even have to be like the video with a lot of views, but if you listen, and I think you will find, for most part, sources. It doesn't have to be related to design. Like, you should start looking, and even better if you can find, actual people, and just listen to their stories before you push for what you actually need. And I find that's the perfect formula.
So it sounds like get a stimulus, and that will help guide you to ask the right questions, or to inspire some stories to come through that you then gather. And then after that, you're able to make sense of that somehow as part of your process to get you closer to the solution.
Yeah, and they will help you because you also honored the knowledge that you're about to extract.
Yeah, yeah.
Because you're going to use that to build something that will probably, replace a big part of what they were doing. And I think that goes beyond automation.
Yeah.
I think it's just any transformational process, and which is what we're mostly doing now, right? Before it was about service. Sorry, did I cut off?
No, you're good.
Yeah. Okay, so you have this progression, right? When we were doing products, then we moved to a different layer. It's like, no, this is a service now. So service goes beyond product. Product is just the way you sort of deliver that service. Yeah. And then we moved to experiences, which was everything that happens around that, that service, and the tiny differences in, after you buy something, what happens, how do you feel throughout the process. It's no longer valid that, you just put something on your shopping cart and that is it. Experience would be more everything that you felt outside of that purchase. It goes beyond the number. But now we're moving from experience to transformation. So it is even, it stops being transactional and it starts to get, relational. And right. So if I were going to extract, information from the stakeholders, the people I'm interviewing, you have to also provide them with something. It cannot just, it doesn't matter that that they're hired to do that, or I think they will give you more if you're also, putting the extra effort. Yeah. And you're also being mindful of the narratives that you're pushing. As in, you see a lot of, I think people are too quick to just say, oh, this whole industry is dying. And, that's someone's dad's career. That's someone's dream job. Like that, don't just go around, trying to eliminate things. Like it's 2020, right? The world doesn't need any more of that. And, even if that means that you're pushing your new service or product on the basis that something and it's been disrupted or disappearing, like you need to be mindful of how you sort of project that narrative. And that I think we'll see more of that happening with AI and the pace. And that's going to be teachers are no longer this, like you can just have the machine will decide what the best learning path for your students are. And it might be that you can actually work alongside a computer if you don't make people feel so resistant to it. So yeah, but there I have a lot of thoughts about how we're going to move through this transformation phase, and what we're pushing to the world and what we're getting back based on that.
One thing I would love to get your perspective on is we've talked a lot about experience and the motivation, the reason why behind something. I'm reading Awaken the Giant Within, which is a book by Tony Robbins. So it's like a self-help kind of book, or personal growth, whatever you want to call it. The idea, though, that I'm curious to explore myself, so this is what I would like your perspective on, is that humans are motivated by only two things. One is pain and the other is pleasure. How do you see that to actually change behavior when we talk about the experience we're trying to create, the results that we're trying to get, going from transactional to relational? How do you see motivating humans in the solutions that you create play out in result to motivating them by pain or pleasure?
Exactly. So that's a very interesting question. There is actually, that is also used, or there's some people studying design thinking from the perspective of like embodied design thinking. And so pain and pleasure are very sort of physical reactions.
Yeah.
And what they say is that those actually, because before they thought the brain was, it was in front of body, right? As in your logical mind without that sort of body interface was interacting with those ideas. But now this whole new perspective is that it's body first, and then it's your brain making interpretations from that.
Yeah.
So they do discuss this sort of going from pain to pleasure, and also I've heard like going from hate to love, which is different things. And yeah, no, it's super interesting because they talk a lot about this autobiographical brain.
Okay.
And it's that sort of part of us that tells our story, and it's very linked to this pain pleasure thing. So the more you learn about this part of the brain, I think they also call it the narrative or narrator brain.
Okay.
Is that we're actually able to change our stories, right? Because the way that that brain works is just it's so flexible, and the way we tell something, we can actually shift it. It doesn't become false, right? So I think when you're going through this transformation process, and when you're taking people through it, there is one thing I really like when I think about transformational process is this writing from Nietzsche. So he talks about the process of metamorphosis. He talks about 3 stages, which is like being the camel, the lion, and the child. And it's lovely. And so first you have to start as a camel.
Yeah.
And that means that you have to carry that burden across the desert. You have to do the work before you can start transition into the lion. And the lion will only know how to destroy and deconstruct, but he cannot create, he cannot transform. But only after going through that deconstruction, and there is a lot of fighting with the past and changing those ideas. And only then can the child exist, and the child will just play and create, right? And so I like to think about this sort of camel in every transformation process. You cannot just shortcut to child, because you have to walk. You have to cross that desert. You have to feel the weight that is inside, on top of you. And I think that is the basis of actual transformational processes, is that they will be like beyond the experience. Transformation requires that walking, through the desert and becoming that creator child. There is anything that I think doesn't include that won't be real transformation, because it takes it takes more work, and it takes deconstructing, because you cannot transform and keep telling yourself the same story, right? So I know that people might want that, and we humans want that when you go to therapy. Even it's the oldest transformation process that there is. And most of the time they will not even give you advice. And that is confusing. Like, therapy is not really an experience. They cannot provide you the experience of wellness. Like, that would be more of me going to a spa and feeling relaxed. That might be an experience, but you don't feel the same way when you go to therapy as you do at a spa. Like, if I were to go to a spa and I end up crying, then something is wrong here, right? So I would say, for me, that is the difference between experience. Is like a spa day, you know what will happen. There is a set amount of feelings that you will allow to happen, and you will probably get very specific services, and they will apply something. Oh, your skin is dry, this will do it.
Yeah.
But if you go through a therapy process, maybe you're just talking throughout the entire session, but there won't be take this, because I see they cannot even tell if it's not like your skin. They cannot say whether it's they have to just you both have to bear the burden together. You have to walk through the desert. And even from the therapist perspective, making a wrong assumption before they heard it's dangerous. And so I think one is transformational. It's relational.
Yeah.
It's not a transaction, even though you pay for it. And whereas the spa is like more of an experience. And maybe it's an extreme example, but it's one that works for me. When I think you don't really know how long those conversations have to, for how long they have to go before you make a breakthrough.
Yeah.
They cannot assure you a cure for whatever it is that you're dealing with. There is no set time. There might be one for coaching, but it's like in a very narrow scope. But I don't think therapists can assure you like in 1 year you will feel better. And you see that sort of advice. People try to put this transformational processes into time. I've seen that advice maybe for breakups. You see it where they say, oh, the length of your relationship, and then that turn that into months. That's how long you have to feel bad. And we do that because it provides a sense of control, right? I mean, I will feel bad for 3 months. And it doesn't work like that. There is people who will wake up in 1 week and they will be fine. There's people who will feel something for 2 years. So I feel the same applies to any transformational process where there will be, before you can deconstruct you will have to take that walk. So I don't know if that's that's very off topic, but it's the way I like to think about this this process of dealing with resistance and achieving actual transformation.
It makes me think about if I think about creating training, back in the classroom days, I'm going to say there was a lot of reflection time. Not a lot, but like, sorry, that was a way to embed the learning, reflect. Makes me think about it now in terms of reflect. But when we talk about the future, I'm trying to get the individual, if I think about all the things that we've been talking about today, if the individual reflects and we are allowing them the space to reflect, that's the important part. We allow them the space to reflect, and the intention of the reflection is to think about a future state that they would like to be in. And we think about that from a pain or pleasure perspective for themselves. We just prompt them with the right questions. And it links what you were talking about earlier, reminds me of Joe Dispenza and his ideas of neuroplasticity. And what he says is, if you think about the future state and try to feel it, and what you were saying, the embodiment, where we can embody that future outcome that we're trying to achieve from a training perspective, that individual is tapping into their own personal motivation and what that learning outcome means for them, and whether that is pain or pleasure, because it will come up in an instant as a reaction based on the stimulus. So I wonder, I'm just formulating this out loud, and it's something I want to experiment with on my next client project, is creating the space for reflection, prompting them to reflect about a future they would like to have in response to the learning outcome, and asking them, if you didn't do it, which was a question you had earlier, I think, what effect does something have on X if we don't do it? So linking it to pain and pleasure, and then saying, what would I need to do to have it? What would I need to get rid of? And then really feeling, okay, now I have it, what does it look like? And I wonder how that would play out when we think about the things that we're trying to achieve in our solutions.
That is really interesting, because there is going to be pain involved in sort of letting go or detaching from any story that we tell ourselves. And so it's interesting to to think that you can actually start including those sort of parameters in the type of work you do.
Yeah, and it goes on. Oh, you continue.
No, and because I've heard about this bias for optimism that we have, and it's most likely that ideas that people are very optimistic about will be the ones implemented, but not for a particular reason other than the optimism feels that it can avoid, that you can avoid pain. So I think it goes back to what I was saying, like this formulas of in X amount of days you will feel better. It comes from optimism. We might adopt people say, hey, I know it's ridiculous, but it makes me feel good. It's to think that in this amount of time I'm going to feel this. And I think it goes back to the same thing, like you will have this bias towards optimistic ideas, and your rational brain will know that there is no basis for it. And if you bring that into decisions that you're making with clients, like I don't see how that can be different. To believe that oh, we'll get this, like people will participate in this way, like students will be, and so it's you're enthusiastic about it, and you might dismiss potential things that are very painful to discuss. So I think it's super interesting to bring that into the discussion, but it will most likely require a process, right, to get people to share and to have that capacity of, of self-reflection. That is tough. that is really hard. It's really hard to achieve, but that again, it goes back to having to bear the burden. No shortcuts.
But possible. I think it's just, like you say, the constraints. We create the environment is what I'm hearing a lot of your stuff is. Create the environment and give them the tools. And the rest will play out, basically.
Yeah. And be mindful of the consequences. I know there's, at least if you're doing social sciences, if you're in academia and studying, there is a lot that you cannot, show to people without breaking an ethical guideline.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, especially when there's like vignette experiments where you're just showing them some text, or even that is highly regulated. As in, would they be hurt by your experiment? And so thinking about that and how that whole field has developed on this basis of having to be bound by the ethical guidelines of how you intervene, how you mind people's feelings and everything. And now we have some sort of unregulated approaches, and at the industry level outside of academia. And so I think also educating ourselves in the way those experiments are conducted is also important. When I know I was extremely curious about that, because I kept thinking, how come designers only have A/B testing, or very very few tools when you ask them, how do you know something is better than this other option. And so I decided to sign up for summer school in survey methods, and that involves the questionnaires are just one part. Like survey methods are interviews, observation, every sort of experiment that you could do, but from a academic point of view. So I went there, and it was like 2 weeks, very intense, with a lot of sampling methods and how to design multifactorial experiments. It was people from social sciences, economics, politics. Pretty much everyone held like some sort of PhD, and I was like a designer. But I went there, and they did not notice, so that was good. And I got so much respect from how much they plan their testing.
Wow.
How because they have this sort of peer review system, and how they document everything. For example, if one of the things I see that happens in design sometimes is like you try out something, and then this other unexpected result happened. And it's like, oh, I'll take this because it was good, right? And so in the scientific process, in testing, you cannot actually do that. You would have to launch a whole new study if you want to explore why that one thing happened, but you have to report on why you failed and why your hypothesis was wrong, because that's That's sort of and you also cannot, like at the end of it, if you had a sample of, let's say 200 people, and there was, 100 that did the thing that you wanted, you cannot remove the others from your experiment. You are bound to that sample number that you determined at the beginning. So that means you also have to deal with the ones who did not perform as you expected from your hypothesis, right? And that would be the same for if I'm planning to have this course or intervention, whatever, and I will have 100 students. I cannot simply get rid of the 20 that failed at the end, because you would have to share that, you would have to report that. It would be against the process.
Yeah.
If you don't make that part of your paper. And so you will see, for example, with boot camps and things like that, where work in tech in 3 months, and they will say X% get placed in a job, and that's our success metric. I want to know what happened with those 20% who failed at your boot camp, and I want to know what you're doing about it. You don't have to, like, no one will ever guarantee, like I cannot guarantee that every prototype, everything, like it won't be successful. Like designers could be involved in a business failing. It could be.
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah, but it's an actual part of how do you handle that risk. And so I think when that has to be even more crucial with learning. What is the percentage of failed, of students that fail that we will allow before, because we have a responsibility when we brought them into that program. And I still don't have all the answers to that, because I know it's where at the end of the day you have to work, you have to you have to deal with that some people will not be successful in the spaces that we create. But in terms of what we communicate, and that's the sort of peer review process that scientists they hold that to a very high standard. And I think now we're going back to what we initially discussed, which is how do I get critique from my work other than just people liked it, and where are the ones disagreeing with this? And that's what they will usually do. They will have this system where they need to get everything reviewed by others. And you need to include every number, every story, and that is so hard to do. I don't know how you could come up with some sort of portfolio. So I don't think it has to happen at that level where that is loud. I'm sorry, because you're not going to sell your service as I failed this, but maybe internally we need to create communities and those sort of groups where we open up, because I think, and it goes back to pain and pleasure, right? Like it would be it's like I said, for example, what I was saying about you reviewing work. There is pleasure in seeing that, like having your people comment on your on something that you built.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we're not talking about those other things. Maybe that is how we transform, our industry, if we create those spaces. And we talk about, and not failure as in oh, you failed, that is good learning. Like, I think that it simplifies people's experience with failure, means different things.
Yeah.
Based on where you fall after you failed. What's your safety net? Like, not everyone can afford to.
Does go back to pain or pleasure, because we apparently associate anything that happens to us, our first experience of it is linked to pain or pleasure and where it is on the spectrum. So, for example, in the book, Tony Robbins talks about, I think he doesn't drink beer, and the reason is that his first experience of beer was his dad would drink it, and he thought his dad was cool. He idolized him. So he had this experience of pleasure. Beer would be a good thing. He'd be a man if he drank the beer. So he said to his mom one day, I want to have a beer. I want to drink like dad. And she said, no, you're not drinking. You're too young, whatever. And he said, no, I really want to do it. And she said, fine, you want to do it? You're going to drink like your dad. So she got a 6-pack and she said, here's your first beer, drink it. And he had it and he was like, oh, this is fine. She was like, and he was like, oh, I've had enough. And then she goes, no, you're drinking like you said you want to drink like dad. So here's the second one, drink it. And she forced him to drink all 6. He ended up spewing. So now his first experience of that is linked to pain. So therefore he no longer wants the pleasure that he originally had because it's been overwritten. So I think it's a really interesting concept for us to consider, is if it's somebody's first perception or first experience, or we're trying to change that experience from their current perception of it.
Yeah.
How do we do that? And what is that going to create? Is it pain or is it pleasure? Is it really strong? Because that's what will be hooked. That's what they're going to embody. And that's what they will experience moving forward, until again, on the spectrum, they have another experience that sways it to the dominant point of it.
Exactly. And if all you hear is, oh, failure is good, and everyone is like glorifying it, that is isolating.
That's a big thing at the moment. Failure, learn from your failure. There's an acronym that means like fall and get up again or something. It's not that, but like, you know what I mean? So we are trying to encourage that, but we don't look at what you're saying, that spectrum and where it's at and how people relate to failure and what meaning they make of it for them. So we need
what does it mean? And now that's what I was saying, right? When we were talking about the whiteboard exercise, like, if I fail at one, I have that evidence.
Yeah.
Where I can tell myself that it was like and then maybe failure is constructive.
Yeah.
But if that was, my first whiteboard session, I couldn't come up with anything. There has to be someone there reaching out, whoever organized it, and making sure that I know, they're setting up the, some other means for me to start doing that. So, and I think that will be, it will be the same as in you participating in a classroom, or, so it's interesting. But I think it goes back to, again, we just want to put every failure into the same box, just like we want to put every client experience into, and just, failure, good. It's an oversimplification of
things. Because what if your organization doesn't actually give you permission to fail and you get fired? Well, we don't really want you to fail in that instance either. So it's interesting.
Yeah. So So
well,
giving advice again is,
yeah,
that is where you need to, you know, be mindful of, you know, how what worked for us might not work for everyone.
Yeah. So this leads really well into my summary, because I think there's been a lot of ideas shared. And what's interesting about your thought process is you speak as a process designer, which I think is really interesting. So you have your idea and then you take us through your process, which is, this is the current experience, and you make it relatable, and then you try to close the gap, and then the last thing is the outcome. So I noticed that your ideas all follow a process to get someone from your idea to the outcome.
Wow.
You can watch it back, but I feel like you live
I will do that.
through it. But to summarize, in not giving advice, what I've got is documented my notes from our conversation. And I have some questions that I want the learners to maybe document and ask themselves to help improve their process. And it summarizes everything, not everything, but a lot of the ideas we've been chatting about today. So as a problem solver, a designer, whatever you want to call yourself, ask yourself, how can I withhold judgment in this situation?
Yeah.
The next one is predicting the resistance that you may get from stakeholders in advance. So asking yourself, what resistance may I face? And then the second part of that is, how can I overcome that, so that you're pre-prepared for objection
Yes.
resistance. How can I create an experience or an emotion for the person receiving what it is that I'm creating? How can I get a skeleton of ideas to stimulate stories from the people that I'm designing for? What effect does X have on X? How will I be perceived? And this is more from asking it from the learner's perspective, because I think if you can figure this out for that individual learner or the end user, you actually will tap into a huge motivation thing that you could solve right up front. So caring about that judgment of others or the perception of others on an action or a behavior that someone has. How can I be more relational rather than transactional?
That's a big one.
What is the intervention I want to create? What are the consequences, good or bad, of the decision I'm about to make? What are the consequences of the good or bad of the thing that I'm about to put my learner or my end user through? And the last one that I have is, what is the future desired state that I want to create?
Yeah.
They're the questions you can ask yourself as problem solvers of the world to help create better solutions. But Ghislaine, thank you very much for the conversation today. I appreciate it. If you've liked any of the ideas, we'd love to know how you're going to put them into practice and implement them into your world. So please let us know in the comments of the video so that we can think about how you're transferring the knowledge that you've gained from this chat. But we appreciate you. Thank you very much for watching, everyone, as well. Have an awesome day. This is Learning with Belvista Studios, and we appreciate you.